So, hello everyone. This is Matt Orozco with Macabre Daily here with a wonderful interview for you. I'm really happy and excited to introduce the creative team behind Mother Noose Presents Once Upon a Nightmare, something we recently reviewed on the site. So please go ahead and check out our review. We're going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but frankly, you should go check out the movie so that way you can enjoy all the fun and the references we'll make along the way. So I don't want to take up too much air with introductions on my end, but I want to get the team over here introduced. So I'm going to start by having John introduce yourself, then we'll go to Richard and Eric.
I'm John Devlin. I was an actor on Mother Noose Presents Once Upon a Nightmare. I played Merrick the Wooden Boy in The Real Boy, and I also played Officer Woods in The Big Bad.
That's awesome. He's underselling it. He was more than an actor. He was everything in that movie. I'm Richard Tanner. I'm the director and writer of Mother Noose Presents Once Upon a Nightmare.
Thank you, Richard. John. Eric.
Hi, my name's Eric. Eric Poe. I was an actor in a couple of the segments. I was in Cinderella and I was in The Big Bad. And I also wrote and directed the title sequence opening called Through the Woods.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I'm really happy to have this conversation with you all, and thank you for taking the time on your Saturdays to chat with me. We have so much to talk about this movie, but I want to start with a very basic question, which is, how did this idea for the Mother Noose concept come to be? It's obviously a riff on Mother Goose, but it's fascinating that no one has really taken this approach, at least to my knowledge, with taking those stories or those nursery rhymes and trying to transcribe them into something more horrific. So where did the idea come from?
I'll hit that up first, since I came up with the idea. When I originally started getting into filmmaking, the first film I ever did was called Once Upon a Nightmare. Piece of garbage. It was, we did a single short and then went straight into making this movie. What I found out, though, was making an anthology is genius when you're doing low-budget movies, because people may leave, but you're like, all right, well, that's just one shot done. I'll just do that later. Instead of having a movie where your main actor quits and you're like, oh, my God, how do I film the rest of this? But over the years, we did other movies together. All of us worked on Frank and Thug, and, we've done a lot of shorts together, a lot of different things. But I always kept in the back of my mind this fairy tale, because the stories were amazing. You can do anything with it, just keep coming. There's a fountain of just material out there. And I even got the idea from when I was a kid. I used to be obsessed with Are You Afraid of the Dark? And there was one episode called The Final Wish, which had Bobcat Goldthwait, who is terrifying in his own sense for a kid's show. And it was all about fairy tales, but the grown-up versions of them. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a grown-up version. And we may have crossed the line a couple of times on grown up to more adult X-rated closer. That's what started it.
That's great. And that's so great to see. I think that when you have an idea, but then you want to come back to it, it means there's just something more to tell, right? There's just a lot more you want to do with it. And I think that that's always so fascinating to be able to go back and take something you started and then see what else you can do with it later. Eric, over to you. When you were coming together on some of the bits for the anthology, what were some of your inspirations you drew from?
As far as the acting or the writing directing part?
The writing directing part. We'll start there.
Well, Richard kind of came to me after everything else had been written, and a lot of it had already been filmed, I think, if not all of it had been filmed. And he said, I kind of need an intro section if you wanted to write and direct it. And so basically just gave me what he needed to get the invitation from Mother Noose to the assistant. And so I started thinking about, how can I make it, tie into fairy tales and the things that are already here. And of course, it draws heavily on the Little Red Riding Hood theme with the wolf and Riding Hood. But I tried to put in elements from all of the other segments. So, there were cookies, and the three little pigs were police officers. There's a police officer in it. I had the book in it. I had clowns in it that show up in The Real Boy. So I really kind of tried to draw on the elements from the other segments to develop my, intro that would give everybody a kind of a sense of, these are the things that are going to be coming up in the film.
Wow, it's one of the more challenging parts, I think, of an anthology is this decision around, do you have a wraparound or do you just kind of tell them as singular stories? And I think there's a lot of credit where credit's due around even the wraparound, even in an attempt for wraparound. In this case, you all have a very cohesive kind of plot line that runs through from the start to the end. But was it always intended to have those bookends to it, or was it something that just kind of came naturally through the process of creating and thinking about what you wanted to do with it?
Poe did a really good job with that, the beginning intro, because one thing that did happen with it as well is it was COVID had hit. That was just like, we were done filming the movie, and I was like, well, what we were going to do is not going to work. So Poe, what can you come up with? Because he does great stuff, especially if you just give him freedom, and blew my mind watching it. But it was always intended to be a wraparound. Like Mother Noose was supposed to be the story, and our actress Jezebel was amazing in that. Like, that's what ties it together for me. I've actually had several people say that's their favorite part, is watching the wraparound go. And I always grew up, like, my favorite anthologies were like Tales from the Hood, Tales from the Dark Side, to where you care almost more about the story being told than the stories within. So yeah, it was definitely like, my anthologies have to have a wraparound. And I, like I said, I love how Poe tied it together, because it feels like we meant for it to happen instead of it just happening. So
yeah, I think that, again, that's the hard part, right? Is to make it all seamless and like it's all supposed to be. But we'll probably get into this a little bit later, just the aspect of the filmmaking and how it doesn't always come together, easily or cleanly or in the way you always want it to. But let's kind of shift gears to over the inspiration behind some of the acting. John and Eric, I know you both took roles in some of the segments, particularly John. I think yours is one of the more unforgettable roles throughout the film. So where did you draw from on some of those inspirations to play that character and really do a good job of coming across extremely sympathetic, despite the absurdity of so much of what's going on around you and to you, inside you?
Yeah. Well, when he first sent me the script, off the bat, I was like, this is like very similar to The Elephant Man. And I love The Elephant Man. It's like a great movie. So that was definitely, that was the number one inspiration for that character for me. And his name was even Merrick. John Merrick was the Elephant Man. So obviously Richard was inspired by it as well as what Tales from the Crypt, Laura Berth, I think, was an inspiration for that. So yeah, that was the primary inspiration. And I liked the challenge of having to do the part with no lines. I had no dialogue the entire time, so it was all, I had to be like body and facial expressions. So I really liked the challenge of that. The other part I wasn't even supposed to do. It was a different actor that was scheduled for that role, and I just happened to be doing BTS photography the night before, and we found out that he couldn't make it. So Richard put me on the spot. He's like, "Hey, do you want to do the scene with Aaron?" I was like, "You bet your ass I do. Hell yeah. This is awesome." So I get more screen time and get to work with Aaron, but I kind of just, crammed the lines in the night before because it was like last minute. And I don't know, just on the whole thing was kind of spur of the moment. I just started doing an accent. They were wondering what the hell I was doing, but we just went with it. I mean, that's just what came to me. I didn't really draw any inspiration from anything on that one. It's kind of weird.
Sometimes just the way it happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes the spontaneity. I mean, there's entire shows and movies that are heralded for their spontaneity. So I think just making it work, and if it works, don't every take can be a good take, or if you want to do something with it. And for Eric, for your roles that you were doing, was there anything particular you drew on for inspiration from the acting side of things?
Just preparing for a role and kind of looking at what that character is supposed to be. And initially when Richard had asked me, he said, there's a couple of different roles. Which one do you want to play? And I said, Hayes, because it's the Aaron Brown segment. It sounded like the more fun role to me. So I just started thinking about what I would, how kind of disgusting and horrible a person I would be for that. And that, of course, was in The Big Bad. And then later on, he said, "Oh, well, could you come over and do the, the father for the Cinderella segment. And I said, sure. So I drove over, and it was, that one was pretty straightforward. I think it's just, you know, kind of a father, a little kind of a timid guy, sympathetic guy, who actually kind of maybe inadvertently gives his daughter the key to, you know, solving all of her problems in the Cinderella story. So yeah, I mean, that one was a little bit easier. It was more simple and straightforward, and not I don't know if I would say any of them were really nuanced, but I definitely put a lot of thought into the disgustingness of the Hayes character in that segment versus the Cinderella's dad in that segment. It was just a timid character on that one. But
it's just two different headspaces, right? You know, one of them is this kind of almost deplorable, you know, person who's without any regard for anybody else, and then you have someone who's almost on the opposite side of that spectrum, who's much more introverted and as you said, timid. So I think it's I wouldn't sell yourself short on being able to switch between those two, you know, being able to go from complete opposite ways of thinking and reacting to things. And it's one thing to say, you know, and write someone who's nasty on paper. I think it's another thing to actually act that way. And you know, John, when I was watching your segment in particular, I kept thinking about the movie The Fear as well. And I'm thinking, you know, they're really pulling off like the look of wood on the makeup, like, and I think you really it's really sold to you as like, hey, this is like, there's no punches pulled with it, but at the same time, you can tell there was a lot of care taken to make this look as close to wood as you possibly could get it. So I know you had some hand in some of the visual effects as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I kind of had to figure out a way to pull this off with no money. So you know, I kind of just brainstormed for like a month or two. I had a little bit of time, and I found a wood grain roller, you know, like a paint roller. I was like, well, I'm not an artist, so this makes it simple. And you know, I experimented with different kinds of paint and found that acrylic paint, when it dries, it kind of chips, like it looks like bark when it dries. So if you have the pattern right, it does look a lot like wood once it dries up. So that's what I went with. And then I had to keep applying applications because the slightest movements had it just crumbling off of me. So there's a lot of putting on paint.
I imagine I can see it now. Just you kind of rolling yourself, like almost the opposite of a lint roller. It's taking off the lint, it's putting on the paint at this point. But it, you know, it works. And I think there's something, you know, you mentioned the aspect of no money, but also this idea of, you know, doing this all on your own. And I was curious to know, like, how you all, because getting behind the scenes in the production process, you know, what were some things that you all were like, wow, that went really, really well, and we're really proud of what we did there? And then what are some things like, you know, hey, we wish we could have done this a little differently? Any feedback from any of you on some of the you know, getting this together to its point? And we'll talk more about some tips you all might have, but really more just like the production process. So Richard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my biggest thing with it was this is the first movie I worked jointly with Wages of Sin, which is, you know, Dan Beck, who's not here, Stephen Gillum, Eric Poe, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Like, we actually had crew on this movie, and it makes a huge difference. Like, we had sound, we had, you know, PAs, we actually had stuff behind the scenes, and it worked really well. I mean, there's some things I can look back on it and nitpick, which I think any filmmaker is going to, but as far as the money we had involved in it and the things we did, I couldn't imagine doing much better. Which might be telling to people who watch the movie and go like, this is a piece of shit. But no, it was, I was really proud of everyone in it, because even some of the scenes that I didn't like, I watched them again. For instance, Cinderella was my least favorite to film. It was very stressful. Everything went wrong. I lost a lot of people in it, and I didn't think we were going to make it. But now I watch it and I'm like, wow, we really pulled this together. Oh my God, some of the gore in this looks great, and the special effects are good. So I have no complaints with the crew at all. Like, everyone in it, it was magical almost.
That's great to hear. And what about you, Eric? What are some things that, you know, behind the scenes you're really proud of in regards to getting this production going, and some of the work that put up on screen?
Well, I really love that I was able to be involved in so many segments of it. I came to Atlanta a couple of times to Richard's house when we worked on The Big Bad, and then when we worked on Cinderella. But Dan and I worked together as part of the Wages of Sin in Augusta, Georgia, which, you know, it's a couple of hours away. But Dan had asked to direct The Real Boy, and so we put together all the sets for The Real Boy at the Wages of Sin studios. We had John came over and Layla and Nick came over to be part of that, and we put together, you know, some extras and people to be in it as well. So I mean, that's a lot of fun. Anytime I get into a studio and we can put together a set that looks like what we would like it to look like, that's always fun. And working with your friends and working with people that you like to work with, and so you get an excuse to hang out with people while you're making something creative, you know. I think in the Through the Woods, which, you know, was my segment, so, you know, it's my baby a little bit, but, you know, we really didn't put together a big set for it. We had the part with Mother Noose at the very beginning at the desk. We did that part there, and then the rest of it we found locations so we could kind of do almost everything outside. And but again, it's fun. You know, we built mailboxes to be used, and we actually brought one over to Atlanta so we could catch Nick on the other end over there. I mean, all those kind of things are fun to me. It's a creative outlet, and I love it.
That's great. And I think there's something you mentioned in the beginning around, you know, having a hand in more segments than you expected. And I think, you know, there is, I think it's less common in more independent films, but the larger the film gets, the more kind of transactional parts become. And I think when you are involved in so many different parts of the process, whether it's in different segments behind and in front of the camera, I think you become more invested just naturally, right? And that investment shows up in wanting to put out the best possible product you can. And I think, so there's, you know, there's something unique you get to do in that regard when you're working with people closely, is that you get to wear those different hats. And it's some of the thrill, right, is to have that chance to try a few things out. What about you, John? What was your experience with production, and what are some highlights from you?
Well, you know, I'm basically in front of the camera for most of this and not so much behind the scenes, but like I did do the makeup, and I wish, like you mentioned the fear, I wish I could have pulled off something like that, because that looks amazing. But with my, you know, what I had to work with, I think I came up with something decent that works for, you know, and I took ownership of the character. I wanted to develop the look. So, you know, it wasn't just them putting it on me. I wanted to do it too. And I wanted to just really have my hands on that. I am fortunate that I did get, in my opinion, two of the best parts in the film. You know, I get both of the sex scenes in the movie. It's a weird coincidence that I'm a wooden boy and I'm also Officer Woods, and I'll have wood in both segments, and I have the same prop inserted into my body in both segments. And none of that was planned out. That's all coincidence.
Like the Clerks 2 back here. Never go ass to mouth.
Yeah.
He went ass to mouth,
Yeah.
man.
That he did, wood to mouth. But there was, you know, I think when you mentioned the aspect of, you know, doing the best you can with what you had, and then also the makeup side of it is, you know, I think you could have the world's best makeup, but if you don't sell the character, it doesn't matter. All that other stuff just doesn't mean much. And I think that's really what's most important when you're watching anything, is like, do I believe that this person's really bringing that character to life, you know, and everything else just is in support of that. So I think you absolutely nailed getting that character, bringing them to life.
I appreciate
that. Certainly the Serbian film, Fairy Tale, we all knew we wanted, but we were afraid to ask for. So I think this is a kind of more backwards facing question, but how did you all come together? You know, what's the history of you all working together? It sounds like there's been a few films where you all partnered. So tell me a little bit more about how you all met.
You start, Richard.
All right. So this is going to sound cocky, but I think I'm the start of it, because I know the reason. Let's start with Poe. Like Poe, I met because of a person that helped me make a Buck Short Productions. That was Danielle Page. She's like my little sister. We started this together. Grant says now she's moved to California and everything, but she did a movie called Strip Club Massacre, and Poe ended up on it. Wages of Sin went on it, And she talked me up apparently, and they were like, "Oh man, we want to meet Buck Short. We want to meet Buck Short." And I met them and saw their films and was like, why the hell do y'all want to meet me? Y'all are making things 10 times better than I do. But they had no idea how to get into this Atlanta film thing. And I'm just, a little social butterfly that's like, "Hey, everyone, I know everybody. Let's go up here. We're going in. You're not playing our film. You are now." And they just started hanging out, and then we started doing everything. And John, I think, is also a Danielle Page, if I'm not mistaken. Like, she did
Nathan.
Nathan? Okay.
Yeah, because I was a pro wrestler prior to doing this acting stuff, and Nathan, who was on Frank and Thug, put out a call for extras. I answered the call, and he's the one that booked me on Amazon Hotbox as well, because I needed some stunt guys who could choreograph fights. So Nathan used to call like deathmatch wrestling. It still does apparently, and so that's how I got linked in with the Buck Short, and I met Wages of Sin on that set too.
Wow, so it sounds like there's a great little horror community in the Atlanta area. And I think that's one of the things that we have kind of, it's funny, we I'm sure collectively there's probably quite a few Vinegar Syndrome fans among us on this call. And I think that they made a complete business out of finding regional horror from, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and same with AGFA and all the genre film that they put out. But, we're kind of ignorant, I think, to what's happening in our now. People still look at the beacons of entertainment being the coasts, but not really looking at and obviously has become a massive filmmaking, television production hub over the past, decade or so. But there's still an independent community. And I did a interview not long ago with some folks in Canada, very similar, that there's a massive community of horror fans depending on what part of the country you're in. So sounds like there's a lot really going on in Atlanta that people need to be aware of when it comes to independent horror.
Oh, sure.
Now, what kind of advice do you all have for independent filmmakers out there? Because I think to some extent, the amount of people that actually make films, that will go out there and do this, they're always going to need someone to tell them, "Hey, this is what I wish I would have known," or do this, do more of this, less of that. So what's some sage-like advice you all can offer in regards to, if you want to go out and do this yourself, what should you think of? Now, let's see. Eric, maybe you want to start.
Well, I would, I didn't come to doing the filmmaking stuff until I was quite a bit older. I'd already retired from military, but, it's kind of a passion thing. A lot of the people that I meet are very passionate about wanting to do it. They have a need to do it. So I tell them, I would say, just do it. If there's almost no excuse to not at least try and start, and you can get better from there. But everybody has a camera. Everybody's phone is a camera, or everyone, cameras are affordable. Software, everybody has a computer, pretty much access to a computer. And it's just easy to do, where it wasn't so easy 30 years ago or 40 years ago when people were trying to do it then. So just do it, follow through with it. And it's going to be hard and you're going to get disappointed, but you've got to push through that. And when you actually create something that's yours, and you get that feeling, it's like, I can't really.
You disappeared, Eric.
And a cliffhanger too.
Oh yeah, I wanted to hear the rest of that.
Well, if a sound comes back in, we'll pop over to Richard, and then if Eric's sound pops back in, we'll get the last bit.
I'll continue what he's saying on it. I agree. The best advice I could give would be, do it until it's finished. So many people have great ideas. Everyone can have a masterpiece in your mind. But even if you put a piece of shit out there, just getting it done is more important. It's more important than having talent. It's more important than being creative. The fact that you can start and finish a project. Because everything is always like, oh man, I made this really cool sizzle reel. It's like, well, go make the movie now. You can't wait for it to happen. Because if you're trying to wait for everyone else to do it, or if you're trying to wait to make it perfect, you're not going to be able to. You don't have a Hollywood budget. So pretty much, your grand plans are going to change every 10 seconds. You make a script. I actually have a degree in English. That's why I like writing all these things. But I'll tell you, I have never fallen in love with a script, because I know I'm going to get to the set and be like, well, well, this character didn't show up, so you say these lines now. You just got to be ready to go with it, because you're not going to be able to plan for everything. So, I mean, you should plan, don't get me wrong, but plan that your plans are going to change, and just be willing to roll with those punches, but don't stop. Finish it. Else it's just kind of a waste.
It can't be said enough times. What about you, John?
From an acting standpoint, if you're wanting to get into acting, don't expect to make money. Don't expect to go straight to the top. You have to start at the bottom. You know, I came in as an extra on Frankenthug. You know, I showed up. If you show up, that goes a long way in an independent film, because a lot of people don't. And you show up and you don't complain and you get the job done, and then they'll recognize you. I mean, that's what Richard did with me. He recognized I was willing to work, and hopefully he saw some talent in me. And you know, he brought me in. You know, there's no excuse not to do it, other than you don't really want to.
Yeah.
But you have to be passionate to pursue this kind of stuff. You know, you're not going to get rich. It's a slim to none chance of making it in the industry. So you're doing it because you love it, you know?
Yeah, I think there's something to that, which is this notion of, you know, I'm sure a lot of folks grew up with the idea that I want to be, you know, big shot, making big movies. But at the end of the day, if you really want to make art, you know, you're going to make your art however you need to.
Yeah.
Where you get the money for it or you don't. And I think that that's really what separates the people that, you know, and I don't want to take anything away from folks who, you know, haven't followed through yet, but it's a matter of people that can execute and the people that can have the vision. You know, you have to have a little bit of both, but you definitely have to have more of the former, which is the execution. I think for so many folks, just hearing like, hey, you need to get through it, even if it's not the thing you love or you had in your head, is really something that everyone should keep in mind, because it probably prevents more people from following that passion than it does helping them get through it.
Yeah.
And let's move. I love to kind of shift it over to some of the favorite anthology movies. Now, Richard, you kind of spilled some of the beans earlier and some of the ones you liked, but I will put you both on the spot. And if we get Eric back, love to hear his thoughts on this as well. What are your 3 favorite anthology films? And then why should someone go watch them? So what's your pitch to someone that hasn't seen them? And if you're going to say Creepshow and you think everyone's seen it, there are people who have not seen Creepshow. So everything's fair game. But Richard, let's start with you. What are your top 3, and then a sales pitch for each one?
So I'm hopefully going to steal one from John, because he recently had watched this Dead of Night, 1940s black and white anthology, and it's so beyond its time. I watched it. It's creepy. You got puppets, which are terrifying as is, and it's just this story that you could almost loop to where when it ends, it just starts over flawlessly. And I've never seen anything that good before. It's amazing. Other than it being black and white, you would never know you're watching a movie from the 40s. It fills that, you know, niche now. Twilight Zone would definitely be in mine. Even though, you know, John Landis can go to hell, but other than that, like I love Twilight Zone because it just keeps you going. Each episode is so totally different. The Wraparound's its own story that doesn't have anything to do with it, but it's still fun. And it's amazing. I mean, you got Spielberg, you got Joe Dante. Like, it's just everything keeps giving with that show. It's horror, it's comedy, it's sci-fi, it's nostalgic. Twilight Zone's a near perfect movie. And then the last one's a little bit of a hard to find one. It was a 90s one called Campfire Tales. It had a lot of people that I can't think of right now that were in it that weren't super famous then, but now they are. I think Amy Adams was in it, if I'm not mistaken. But it was just these kids who got stranded going to a concert and told stories to pass the time. And they terrified me because they were very modern, moralistic tales. You know, you got like the hook hand killer, you got, you know, the man under the bed licking a kid's hand, and they were just really scary. And I watched it when I was probably 12 or 13, and it felt so modern that I was never forgot it. And I actually ended up writing a thesis and using some of that with it in college. So you should definitely check those 3 out. Good luck finding Campfire Tales, though. You're going to have to dig deep for that one.
I don't even think it ever made it to DVD. I think it was stuck on VHS. So
that's what I have it on.
Yeah, it's. I remember seeing. It's one of those. VHS staples where like you'd go to a store and could be a Blockbuster or mom and pop, but they had that video slotted right there in the horror section. So John, what are your, oh, and by the way, before John's, you can never hear Midnight Special the same way after seeing Twilight Zone, the movie. It just doesn't, you'd always think of that one thing. So John, what are your top three and what's a sales pitch for each?
I'll go with Tales from the Hood, just because it's really dark and it cuts deep and it has something to say, but it also has like a little bit of humor to it. And it's a fun watch, but man, it takes you some dark places and some messed up places. And the narrator is just over the top and awesome. I cheat a little bit. Let's say like Amicus anthologies are
those account
like Tales from the Crypt, Asylum. They're just great classic Gothic horror anthologies, and you just can't beat those. And then third, I go with, like, since we're talking independent films here, Family Portraits, Trilogy of America. And that's super dark. There's no comedy to that whatsoever. It's just a bleak look at the American family.
It's actually funny you mentioned that one because I felt like there was one of the segments, maybe it was the first, like the Breadcrumb segment actually felt a little bit like inspired by that kind of narrative of like really fucking dark, you know,
Yeah.
like just, there's, I don't even want to talk too much about it because it just, you have to kind of observe for yourself what that feeling of going through that.
Yeah, and I found it very relatable too. That first cutting moment segment, that was very relatable for me.
Yeah, no, it's
going through the roof right now, guys. Thank you.
Well, it'll change you. It's one of those things you just don't forget. Now, Eric, I know we lost you for a little bit. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Well, you left us on a bit of a cliffhanger. I'm not sure if you remember your talk track or not, but if you do, I'd love to get your last thoughts.
Yeah, not sure exactly where I got up to, but I was just saying that I would encourage anybody who wants to make a film just to keep going, push through it, do it. And when you've created something that's like your thing, it's kind of like almost like having a baby, you know, that's your baby, and you get to be proud of it and show it off. So it's worth doing it if you've got that passion to do it. So
wise words. And I'm going to put you on the spot again because we just went through 3 recommended anthology films. So what are your 3 that you want to recommend, and why are you recommending them? What's the sales pitch for each?
Oh, and we're talking about anthology films. Is that what
Yep.
you're saying? That's rough because I love, I've watched a lot of anthologies through the years. I can't even begin to name all of them. Obviously, I think probably one of the best out there in terms of like well written and well done was Creepshow. That might be the best if I had to, you know, kind of identify one. Definitely in terms of, you know, Stephen King writing, and you've got Romero directing and all these other elements to it. And some of them I'm probably not even going to be able to tell you exactly what the name of the anthology is. John might be able to help me out better, but Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe stories,
Trilogy of Terror. It's on the tip of my
Tales
tongue.
of Terror.
Yeah.
Tales of Terror.
That's it. Yeah, Tales of Terror.
I mean, again, you've got some amazing writing. You've got amazing acting in it. I mean, Vincent Price was a legend, and it's just so well done. And I think the other one with Vincent Price, also the Hawthorne stories.
From a Whisper to a Scream.
Was that the name of that one?
I think it had 2 names, but it's the one where he's like the mortician, and the woman comes to pick up a body, right? And he tells her all the stories. Yeah.
Good stuff. And I mean, really, you can. I could keep kind of piecing these around and moving them around, but the original Tales from the Crypt movie. You know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here that, you know, of course that's not 3, that's 4 now. So
There's so many good ones. I mean, I would echo 100% Creepshow being my personal favorite, but also, you know, Asylum, the Amicus one is such a good, such a great wraparound story. From a Whisper to a Scream is easily one of the most underrated anthology and probably underseen anthology films out there. And the story behind how it got made is even as interesting as the movie itself, because it's just one of those spooky situations where it really shouldn't have come to be, but things just kept kind of working and not working against them. And of course, Tales from the Hood, I still think is as relevant now as it was surprisingly when it was made in like 94, like 96. I mean, it's really odd to think that it still is very much of the zeitgeist despite its age, which is not what a lot of anthology horror films can actually say for themselves. So I got a couple last ones here. What's next for all of you? You know, is there anything you all are working on that you're excited about, or anything you want to share that we should keep an eye out for?
I've just got through filming on Night of the Pumpkin People. It's from Bonesaw Entertainment, and it's a double feature with 92.3 The Scream. The wraparound feature is called the ARC Orientation. Just had a couple of small projects like short films. Working on another feature film that I don't know that I could talk about right now.
All right.
And I've got a couple other things. What's that?
I may talk about it.
Okay, well, I'll let you talk about it. Richard, you got something?
No.
No.
No. COVID, man, all of it. I'm not. The only thing I'm working on, and so I'll plug it too, is like I am doing my own show on a Buckshort Productions YouTube page. I recently posted my second film, Room for Rent, on Buckshort Productions YouTube, and it went through the roof. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know that many people wanted to watch it, and it killed me because I'm like, oh, I'm losing money on this deal. And now my goal is to try to get much more of a presence on YouTube. So I'm posting shorts, interviews, and all sorts of stuff over there.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely give you some room to plug some things because I want to get your all's contact information, everybody. And over to you, Eric.
Well, first of all, I wanted to tell Richard he really should plug Director on Director right now because he's released 2 director interviews, but maybe he's going to plug it at the end. I don't know. But anyway, so I actually wrote a script. It's been a couple of years ago now. And my friend Dan and I worked on the script throughout COVID. We went through a couple of different titles. We've settled on, we're going to call it Deadly Sister. And it is kind of a slasher, psychological thriller a bit. We're right in the middle of filming it now. John is attached to it as one of our lead characters. And we may have a name coming up in it. I don't want to say anything about that yet because it hasn't happened. So, you know, once that happens, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we're right in the middle of filming it. We have roughly 6 to 8 days of filming left. We've been mostly filming on the weekends, and we're scheduled to film all this next week from Thursday through Sunday. So that'll knock out a large part of what we have left.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely be waiting to see more about how these come to life. And now I want to, you know, where can people find updates? You know, where's the best place to get, you know, what you all are working on? So John, I'll start with you, then Richard, Eric, just where's the best website, you know, your social handles, where can people find out what you're up to?
I have a actor profile on Facebook. It's just JONDEVLIN, John Devlin, actor. Also on Instagram as under my wrestling name, Devlin Valek, DVLIN _VALEK. Also have, you know, Devlin Valek Facebook page. I think that's about it.
How about you, Richard?
It's easy to find me because I'm a whore for all social media. You can find me at Buckshort Productions anywhere. Facebook is my biggest place. Buckshort Productions, Richard Tanner. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and you know all that's at a Buckshort Prod. And then we have a website, buckshortproductions.com, and that has our store. It has links. It has everything there to where you can. Makes it very simple. So buckshortproductions.com. And then, as he was saying, the YouTube. Definitely go to YouTube, catch Director on Director, catch all the shorts and all our stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. And Eric, where can people follow and find out what you're up to with Deadly Sister and everything you're working on?
Well, at the moment, I would, for all the stuff that I've done, I would direct them to IMDb. Eric E. Poe has I have a lot of acting credits in there, a lot of director stuff and producer stuff. I have a Twitter, believe it or not. I guess somebody still uses Twitter out there. Eric Poe 1 at Twitter. I also have Facebook. Under Eric Poe, it's just my personal one, but Eric E. Poe is supposed to be the more professional, the actor, producer one. But if you wanted to look at some of the stuff that I've actually done, I really would point people toward the Wages of Sin YouTube page. So that's WAGESOFCINE, like cinema, Wages of Sin. And we have, if they go there, we haven't put out a lot of material recently or consistently since probably last October or so. We've put a few things out there, but we used to put things out all the time. And there's a ton of original content on there, from short films to movie reviews to behind the scenes, how-to productions, things of that nature. And it goes all the way back to probably 2015 or so, when we started putting together 30-second movies and all these other things. So Wages of Sin at YouTube will give you a lot of material, and a number of my shorts are on there as well. So
excellent. Sounds like we got a lot of content for people to check out on the various YouTube channels. And I want to send a big thank you to you three again for joining the conversation today. And I can't recommend enough. Everyone go and check out Once Upon a Time, or Mother Noose Presents Once Upon a Nightmare, as well as all the rest of the Buckshot productions of Wages of Sin films. So go onto their social channels, give them a look. And thank you all three again for the time. And I hope to speak again.
Thanks for having us, man.
yeah, thank you.